Bobby Worley. Bobby Worley was born in Fairmont, North Carolina, and was the youngest of the 7 children. Worley was a criminal who had been arrested for raping and assaulting a woman in 1963. Shortly after his release, Worley changed his name to Bobby Wells and went to live with one of his brothers in the Bronx. In 1968, he got into an altercation with a female neighbor and roughed up one of her kids. When the woman threatened to call the police, Worley disappeared. This was the last time his family ever saw him, and he remained a missing person for 25 years. Then, on August 29, 1993, a famous transgender drag queen named Dorian Corey died of AIDS-related complications. In October of 1993, just a few months after Corey's death, a friend and a fellow drag queen, Lois Taylor, was in Corey's apartment looking for costumes that could be recycled or handed down, when she noticed a heavy bag lying on the floor of the closet. It was too heavy to move, so she and a couple of other people sliced the bag open with scissors. Inside layers of fabric, naugahyde, faux leather, and plastic, they found a decomposing body. A fingerprint check identified the body as Bobby Worley. Worley had been shot in the back of the head and was believed to have been dead for 15 to 25 years. The exact details of how Worley's body wound up in that trunk are unknown. It was at first thought that Worley, a known criminal, must have broken in and tried to rob the drag queen, who shot him in self-defense. However, evidence surfaced that Worley and Corey might have been engaged in a romantic relationship after Lois Taylor told investigators that Corey wrote a short story about a transgender woman who killed her lover, and in hindsight, the tale seems like it could have been autobiographical, as it's littered with facts from her real life. Also, before Worley's disappearance, his brother remembered him mentioning a relationship with a transvestite named Dorian. The most prevalent theory is that Worley and Corey had a fight, and that Worley was shot in self-defense when he tried to assault Corey, and his mummified body was hidden inside the trunk to avoid a scandal. The abductions of Miranda Gaddis and Ashley Pond. Lori Pond and her 12-year-old daughter, Ashley, lived in the Newell Creek Village apartments in Oregon City, Oregon. On January 9, 2002, Ashley was running late for school. It was little after 8 a.m. and the bus was just minutes away. The walk up the hill to the bus stop was less than 10 minutes, but Ashley never made it to the bus and never arrived to school. Despite the efforts of the local authorities and the FBI, no clue surfaced as to the whereabouts of the missing girl. She was a popular student who was a member of both the swimming and the dance teams. On that day, she was looking forward to the dance practice after school. Neither her mother, friends, or the investigators believed she had run away. Then, on March 8, 2002, just 2 months after Ashley disappeared, Miranda Gaddis also vanished around 8 a.m. while on her way to the bus stop to the top of the hill. Miranda and Ashley were good friends, and they lived in the same apartment complex. Miranda's mom, Michelle Duffy, left for work at 7:30 a.m. At around 1:20 p.m., Miranda's older sister called their mom to tell her that Miranda had not been at school that day. Miss Duffy called the school and found out that Miranda was indeed absent. She reported her missing and the FBI was again called in to investigate. But once again, investigators came empty-handed. Authorities began to suspect that they were taken by someone that they knew. The circumstances surrounding Miranda's disappearance were eerily similar to that of Ashley's 2 months earlier. There was also a striking resemblance between the girls. Both had similar facial features, height, weight, both had brown eyes, and went up to the same hill to the same bus stop. Then, surprisingly, on August 13, 2002, Ward Weaver's son contacted 911 and reported that his father had attempted to rape his 19-year-old girlfriend. He also told the dispatcher that his father told him that he murdered Ashley Pond and Miranda Gaddis. Both of the girls were friends with Weaver's 12-year-old daughter and had visited her at Weaver's home. These accusations allowed the police to search Ward Weaver's property. On the weekend of August 24th and 25th, the bodies of Ashley Pond and Miranda Gaddis were found on the property of Ward Weaver's rental home. Ashley's body was discovered inside a barrel, in a hole under a concrete slab that had been poured soon after she was reported missing. Miranda's remains were found inside a box in a storage shed on the same property. An autopsy confirmed the identity of both girls. Weaver had a long history of violence and assaults against women. He was also the man that Ashley Pond reported for attempted rape, but the authorities never investigated her complaint. On October 4, 2002, Ward Weaver was indicted for the murder of Ashley Pond and Miranda Gaddis, as well as other counts in an unrelated case, which included sexual abuse, attempted rape, aggravated murder, and abuse of a corpse. To avoid the death penalty, Weaver pleaded guilty to murdering his daughter's friends. He received 2 life sentences without a parole for the deaths of Ashley Pond and Miranda Gaddis. Donna Graybill. In 1995, Donna Graybill was tormented by a non-stop stream of harassment. For 6 months, Donna Graybill of Billerica, Massachusetts, waited for the phone to ring, and every 90 minutes, day and night, it did, no fewer than 2,688 times. She would answer the phone, hear what sounded to her like a rush of air, then a click, then a dial tone. Nobody was ever there. When she finally called the local police, they traced the calls south of the suburban Potomac, home of Theodore and Elizabeth James. However, the Jameses were completely innocent in the matter, and the mysterious calls had actually been made by a very unlikely culprit. The perpetrator was a heating oil tank in the basement of the home. The tank was no longer being used, but 8 years beforehand, an auto-dialing device had been installed on the tank by its original manufacturer, Stewart Petroleum. The device was designed to automatically phone the company to inform them whenever the tank was running low on fuel. The number was disconnected, but in February of 1995, Donna Graybill set up her own 800 number for a business she ran from her home. She got the same number Stewart Petroleum once used to receive calls from their auto-dialing device. Shortly thereafter, the device on the oil tank reactivated and started making a non-stop series of calls to Graybill's residence. Nobody is certain what brought the oil tank to life. Harold Herman, a Bell Atlantic cable maintenance supervisor who traced the calls, said it might have been a power surge or a lightning strike. In the end, she was contacted over 2,000 times by an inanimate object. Gypsy Blanchard. Dee Dee Blanchard and her daughter, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, were anything but your average family, but they made it work for them for a while. Until June 14, 2015, when neighbors of Dee Dee and Gypsy became concerned after seeing unusual Facebook posts on their shared page. Sheriffs in Missouri were alerted, and they went on Blanchard home to check on the welfare of the woman. Inside their home, police found the body of Dee Dee, face down in her bed, lying in a pool of blood from the stab wounds that had killed her several days earlier. There was no sign of Gypsy, who, according to Dee Dee, suffered from leukemia, asthma, muscular dystrophy, and several other chronic conditions, and had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old due to brain damage she had suffered as a result of her premature birth. According to the neighbors, Gypsy was wheelchair-bound and was unable to take care of herself. In the home, Gypsy's wheelchair was found, as well as her medications. This led police to think she might have been abducted and in serious danger. However, police found Gypsy Rose the next day in Wisconsin, where she had traveled with her boyfriend she had met online. She was alive and well, but things were about to get worse for her. Investigators soon announced, to the shock of family and friends and the public, that Gypsy was in fact an adult and had none of the physical or mental health issues her mother had represented her as having. Further investigation found that some of the doctors who examined Gypsy had found no evidence of the claimed disorders, and in one case suspected Munchausen syndrome by proxy, in which a caregiver often exaggerates and induces mental or physical health problems in those who are in their care with the primary motive of gaining attention or sympathy. Didi had changed her name after her family confronted her about how she treated Gypsy and suspected her of poisoning her stepmother. Nonetheless, many people accepted her situation as true, and the two benefited from the efforts of charities such as Habitat for Humanity, Ronald McDonald House, and the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Didi had been making her daughter pass herself off as younger and pretend to be disabled and chronically ill, in the process subjecting her to unnecessary surgery and medication, including a feeding tube put into her stomach, and controlling her through occasional physical and psychological abuse. They often appeared on TV together, including spots on the local news, with Didi always holding onto Gypsy's hand tight, squeezing to alert Gypsy that she said something that she didn't like. Eventually, Gypsy went on to create an online life while her mother was asleep. Through a dating site she signed up for, she met Nicholas GODEJOHN, and together, over the span of 2 years, they devised a plan to get rid of Didi. According to texts and interrogations, Nicholas slipped into the house and allegedly stabbed Didi while Gypsy hid in the bathroom. The couple then took several $1,000s from a safe at the home, and Nicholas mailed the murder weapon, a knife given to him by Gypsy, to his home in Big Bend so that he wouldn't be caught with it. The shocking Facebook posts were traced to GODEJOHN's house in Big Bend, Wisconsin, and the two were arrested on June 16, 2015. Gypsy pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and is serving 10-year sentence, while Nicholas is awaiting a trial on a first-degree murder charge. Yara Gambirazio. On the evening of November 26, 2010, 13-year-old Yara Gambirazio left the Bombrati de Sopra Sports Center alone, but never made it back home, which was only 700 meters away. Her parents repeatedly tried to contact her phone, but there was no reply. At 7:30 p.m., they eventually called the police. Despite a search involving hundreds of volunteers, her body was not found. 2 weeks later, Mohammed FIKRI, a Moroccan builder in the same town, was arrested in connection with the case after a comment he made, which was later found to be mistranslated, and he was quickly cleared. 3 months after Gambirazio's disappearance, on 25th February 2011, her partly decomposed and frozen corpse was found in a field 10 kilometers from her home by a model aircraft enthusiast. Yara had a dozen knife lacerations to her throat and back, which were too superficial to have caused her death. She had lost consciousness and died of exposure. Yara's funeral took place on 28th May 2011. An extensive investigation was launched, in which over 22,000 DNA tests were administered to people from the area and compared with the DNA samples found at the murder scene. Among those asked to undergo the voluntary DNA tests were young men who frequented a disco near the field where Yara's body was found. These included Damiano GUERINONI, whose DNA was very similar to that of the killer. This young man was unquestionably a close relative of the killer. Ironically, his mother, Aurora Zani, had even worked for several years as a daily help for the Yara's family. So a DNA test were performed on members of his family, including one of his uncles, Giuseppe GUERINONI. Even though Giuseppe was deceased, investigators were able to get a DNA sample from an old postage stamp he had licked. To their astonishment, the DNA was a perfect match. The only problem was that Giuseppe had died 11 years before Yara's murder. The DNA match meant the killer had to be Giuseppe's offspring. but his 3 children were eliminated as suspects. Authorities soon discovered that Giuseppe had a reputation as a womanizer and may have fathered an illegitimate child with another woman. Since Giuseppe worked as a bus driver and constantly interacted with the public, over 500 women had to be investigated. A woman named Esther ARZUFFI wound up matching the DNA sample. ARZUFFI had been married to the same man, Giovanni Bossetti, since 1967, when she was only 19 years old. The couple had 3 children, 2 twins, a boy and a girl, born in 1970, Massimo Giuseppe and Laura Letizia, and a younger son, Fabio. The father of all 3, everyone had always assumed was her husband, but the DNA test revealed that the father of her twins is not her husband, but the dead bus driver Giuseppe GUERINONI. DNA testing confirmed that one of the twins, Massimo Giuseppe Bossetti, was Yara's killer, and he was charged with the murder in June 2014. Massimo proclaimed his innocence right from the arrest, stating that he suffered from epistaxis and that someone had stolen his work tools, including a knife and a towel, possibly blood soiled for this reason, and that the DNA proof was fabricated due to either excessive exposure to the weather or human miscarriage. But police maintained that the sample was of excellent quality, and Bossetti was denied any chance of a plea bargain. On 1st July 2016, Bossetti was sentenced to life imprisonment.